Obviously, several years have passed since the incident, and I have never told anyone about my new life. Tonight, I have a good bottle of wine to drink, and I think I'll let my fingers do the talking. I thought I had met the perfect woman. We met in our last year of college at a party, and we instantly hit it off. She was a beautiful blonde with sun-kissed skin, and she could have been a model. She was kind, compassionate, empathetic, and a good listener. She had an active social life with many friends. She got along with my friends, and it was amazing to see how our friend groups merged over the 3 years we were together. Some of our friends even started dating each other. Those were some of the best moments of my life. I was studying finance for my postgraduate degree, and she had a degree in contract law. I mentioned this just to say that we both became successful in our own right. I also took care of my appearance. I was 6 feet tall, 190 pounds, and enjoyed going to the gym. I wasn't a super athlete, but let's just say I was athletic. Before meeting her, I hadn't been in many previous relationships. The first night we met, we were enchanted. We spent the whole night talking, and afterwards, we started exchanging messages and calling each other every day. We had weekly dates, and after a year, when I started my new job, she moved into my apartment. I loved her family, and her family loved me. Her mother, especially, as her father was distant with everyone. It was an intense romance. After 2.5 years of traveling abroad, hiking trips, and luxurious vacations, I proposed. She said yes, and I was on cloud 9. She was making all the plans for the wedding. We talked about our future together, buying a house, having children, and taking family vacations. Then, one night, after we arrived at our apartment, she seemed a bit distant. I immediately noticed it because we had always been very affectionate with each other. It started happening about once a week in the first month after the engagement, but then it became more frequent. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't read so many stories on Reddit and watched videos on YouTube. So, I waited and observed. These moments of her ignoring me would last only a few hours, and then she would return to normal. But after 6 months, with 1 year left until the wedding, it was happening almost every night. A love relationship. Our relationship with her parents was still great, but during Thanksgiving at her parents' house in Louisville, Kentucky, we lived north of Washington, D.C., she seemed distant from me in front of her mother. Her mother, who was a very observant woman, took her aside to talk. I overheard them having a heated but muffled argument. After a few words, they returned to the rest of the family and acted as if nothing had happened. I thought I could ask her about it later, so I did. However, she didn't want to discuss the matter and asked to talk about it at home. I agreed because I deeply loved her and believed we could overcome anything together. Her mother was like an older version of her, with the same stunning appearance, except for a few strands of gray in her long blonde hair. This detail becomes important later. When we got back home, I asked her about what happened, but she refused to discuss it. After insisting for a week, she finally confessed that a coworker was trying to get close to her. She wanted to be honest, so she showed me her phone. As I looked through the messages, I realized that all the messages sent during the time she had been distant from me had been deleted. There was nothing wrong in the messages, but it raised my suspicions. I went into her phone settings and activated the locator since we had the same phone plan. I honestly thought it would prove that she wasn't doing anything wrong. I was wrong. On the second weekend after Thanksgiving, she had a company Christmas party. I had planned to go, but I ended up getting food poisoning and had to cancel. One of her friends picked her up from our apartment because they planned to drink a lot, and she would have a ride for the night. We had planned to spend the whole night together. So, I told her to have fun and that I would be there in the morning. While I was vomiting and barely able to leave the bathroom for more than 30 minutes, I took my phone and checked her location. At first, she was at a restaurant, then at the venue of the company party, and later at a bar. None of that alarmed me until I saw that her phone stopped at a hotel downtown. At that point, I was miserable in every way. I was vomiting uncontrollably, and my exhausted body was finally falling asleep. Between 2 a.m. and 7 a.m., I woke up and saw that she was still at the hotel. Finally, at noon, she returned home while I was recovering. She hugged me and asked about the previous night without mentioning anything about where she had been. She talked about the restaurant, the party, and the bar, but then said she had gone to her friend's house to spend the night, the first lie. Over the next 3 months, she started working later, 3 to 4 days a week. As I began to question her about it, she became increasingly defensive. One night, when my fiancé didn't come home until late, I talked to her mother. I asked her about the Thanksgiving conversation, and she admitted that she thought her daughter might be cheating on our relationship based on how she interpreted her body language. She also said that her daughter had been growing distant from her in their weekly text conversations. With all these speculations in my mind, I kept it all to myself. 2 weeks later, I received a new project at work that would require me to fly to the West Coast from Monday to Friday for the next 5 weeks, starting in 2 weeks. It came with a salary increase, and when I told my fiancée, she was thrilled. However, I didn't realize that she was excited for different reasons. So, I went online and bought 4 motion-activated spy cameras for my apartment. I placed one in the entrance hall, one in the kitchen, one in our bedroom, and one facing the hallway. They were very small and connected to a hidden network, so they couldn't be detected on the Wi-Fi network. I protected the cameras with a password and waited for my first week away. During my absence, she had friends over for the first 2 nights and didn't work late. On the 3rd night, a guy went over to our place. I was furious, sitting in my hotel room, shouting at the monitor and cursing her with every name. They went all the way, first on the couch and then on our bed. The worst part was that while I was watching, I called her to ask about her day. She heard the phone ringing and gestured for it to stop before answering the call. I asked why she was out of breath, and she said she was at the gym, working out. As soon as the call ended, they resumed. When I got home on Friday night, I ignored her and went straight to bed. Early Saturday morning, I got up and went cycling. I was so upset that I didn't even realize I had ridden over 80 kilometers from our apartment. The farthest distance I had cycled before was 50 kilometers, but that day I did 170 kilometers. When I returned, completely exhausted, I took a shower. Later, she and I went out that night, had fun with our friends, and drank a lot. I was internally exploding with feelings of heartbreak, anger, fury, and betrayal. It hurt so much because I loved her deeply. Eventually, I confided in one of our mutual friends, and he told me that everyone knew about it. They all felt sorry for me, but no one said a word to me. That's why they stopped inviting us to hang out. I hadn't noticed before, but I could look back and see that about 3 months earlier, they gradually stopped inviting us less and less. So, I decided to try to win her back. The following weekend, I planned the entire weekend as a pampering weekend in every sense. Wine, dinners, pampering massages, conversations about future plans, and how much I loved her. I knew I was making progress when, after the 4th glass of wine, she started crying, and I could sense the guilt. Rising to the surface, I asked her what was wrong, but every time she tried to speak, she choked up. So, I told her that if she had done something in the past or if she had any conflicts in her mind that she needed to talk to me about, I was more than willing to have a conversation with her. I assured her that if forgiveness was necessary, I would forgive and move forward. The only words that came out of her mouth were how much she loved me. It was hard to believe that, considering I now had 4 separate videos of her and another guy in our apartment. Over the next 8 weeks, as I traveled to the Midwest, which was supposed to last for 10 weeks, I recorded over 41 hours of her with what I later found out was her co-worker. She had never worked late while I was away. I tried to be considerate every weekend, but each week she grew more distant. After witnessing this for 8 weeks, I was shattered. That's when I devised a 12-step plan to escape, gather evidence, and execute my plan. I scheduled an exclusive 2-week trip for us to a resort in Barbados, all-inclusive. She was ecstatic. However, a week before the trip, I told her I had to cancel and suggested she take a friend instead. That's when I knew it was over, and no disappointment shown by her when I couldn't go, and she made plans to go with a co-worker. We ended our apartment lease. 3 days after her trip, as the sole signatory of the contract, I found a job in another city. The company I had been assisting in the Midwest offered me a job with a slight salary increase. We found a new place to live while she was away. The plan was as follows: pick her up from the airport, return home, pack all her things on the same day, get a new cell phone number and email, cancel all social media on Monday, completely separate ourselves financially, withdraw all the money from our joint accounts, close them, put all her money in an envelope, pack it with her things on Monday, arrange for movers to pack and send all my belongings to the West on Monday, take all her things to her mother's house 600 miles away. All of my fiancé's belongings fit in the back and bed of my F-250 truck from Tuesday to Saturday. I would deliver the evidence to her mother and start my new life. I didn't want to do anything legally, so I made sure nothing of hers was missing. It was incredibly difficult to pack all her things beautifully and neatly. I had never cried so much in my life. People often say they will never do certain things when they are caught, but they don't stop. My hope was that she would genuinely confess, so we could forgive and move on. But she never did. She came close a couple of times, but her secret was too difficult to reveal. On Tuesday morning, I left our apartment for the last time, heading north. It took me 10 hours to reach her mother's house. When I arrived, I wasn't prepared for what awaited me. It was around 8 p.m. when I got to her mother's house. I had imagined she would be surprised to see me, considering I showed up unannounced. Since they lived in a gated community, I had to call their house from the front gate. She was waiting for me outside when I arrived. I could tell she had been crying when I found her. I asked her what was wrong and embraced her as she sobbed, saying she suspected her husband was cheating on her with a much younger, slim, and beautiful woman. Astonished, I simply held her for about 10 minutes as she soaked my right shoulder with her tears. When she finally regained control, I asked if we could talk. We went inside, and I asked where her husband was, to which she replied that he had said he was going fishing with his friends at a remote cabin an hour away. Then she said, and he hates fishing. She gave me all the indications that she had realized something was wrong, and apparently, it had been going on for about a year. Doing a bit of research, we found a credit card charge from a 5-star hotel just 20 minutes away. A subsequent call confirmed that her husband was there for a 4-night stay, cheating with his mistress. She asked, 2 pairs of shoes? I repeated, your husband is cheating on you, and your daughter is cheating on me. That's why I came here, to leave her things and move away. I showed her the evidence in a binder, with screenshots I had taken. After looking at the first 3 or 4 pages, she looked at me, stunned. We both embraced and cried for about 30 minutes. At that point, she told us to stop crying and looked at me, saying, well, tonight we can't do anything about it except drink these 3 bottles of Moscato and make out in every room of the house. She grabbed 2 wine glasses and a bottle of Moscato and headed out to their private pool deck, saying, are you coming here or getting revenge? I won't go into too much detail, but that night and the following 3 days were wonderful. After those days ended, we passionately said our goodbyes. I drove to my new destination, and she kept me informed about everything that happened. When my ex-fiancé returned, the day she came back was epic. I cancelled my phone on the morning of her return. So when her plane landed and she called for a ride, it indicated that the phone was disconnected. Apparently, her lover had driven her home, left her there, and when she arrived at the door, a couple of new tenants answered. She freaked out. I can't say how many times she tried to call me because the number was no longer valid. She went to her friend's house to stay for a while, as her co-worker was already married. When she called her mother in a panic, her mother told her that I had been there to leave all her things and mentioned that all her money was there too, 600 miles away. Her mother didn't tell her that she had spent more time with me in 3 days than she had with Leo in the last 6 months. But she did tell her that she knew she was cheating on me and that I had found a new job, a new place to live, and a new career far away from her and all our friends, and that her mother was separating from her father due to infidelity. Apparently, she cried for days and took a week off work, but in the end, she found comfort in the arms of her married lover. Her mother never let her know where I was. I completely cut off that part of my life. The only link I had to that old life was my ex's mother, and she has kept our secret to this day. Share your thoughts on the accounts in the comments. What would you do differently in these situations? The video was made with much care, so give it a like and subscribe. Thank you.